You stopped answering. Not dramatically. Not with a speech or a fight or a final message explaining why. You just stopped. Stopped checking in. Stopped showing up. Stopped trying to make plans that would get canceled anyway. And the silence that followed wasn't lonely. It was relief. You didn't plan it this way. There was no moment where you sat down and decided to cut everyone off. It happened slowly, like water pulling back from a shore you didn't realize you'd already left. One day you just noticed the phone wasn't lighting up anymore. The group chats had gone quiet. The invitations had stopped coming. And instead of panic, you felt something unexpected. People noticed. They called it sudden. They said you have changed. But it wasn't sudden. It was slow. It was years of showing up to find no one there. Years of being the one who remembered, who checked in, who carried conversations that should have been mutual. And then one day, you just stopped carrying them. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full. Full of all the space you used to give away to people who never thought to ask if you had any left. You didn't cut everyone off because you stopped caring. You cut everyone off because you finally started caring about yourself. They'll call you cold, distant, guarded, hard to reach. They'll say you've built walls, that you've changed, that you're not the person you used to be. And they're right. You're not. Because the person you used to be was available at the cost of your own stability, present even when it meant disappearing from yourself. But here's what they won't say, that the only time they noticed you was when you were useful, that your warmth was only valued when it served them. They don't call it abandonment when they let you down. They don't call it distance when they're unavailable. They only call it a problem when you stop being the one who absorbs it. There was a specific moment. Maybe you don't remember the date, but you remember the feeling, the realization. You needed someone. Not casually. Not for small talk or surface comfort. You actually needed help. And you reached out. You sent the text, made the call, showed up vulnerable in a way that scared you. And what you got back was noise, distraction, advice that didn't land, silence dressed up as, "I'm here for you," without the actual presence. Or worse, they showed up late, after the crisis passed, after you'd already handled it alone, the way you always do. That's when it clicked. You'd been alone the entire time. You just hadn't named it yet. The withdrawal didn't start that day. It started years before. In childhood kitchens and distant living rooms where your feelings were too much or not enough. Where you learned that needing made you a burden. But that moment, that one moment, was when you stopped pretending the pattern wasn't there. Your body learned something your mind didn't want to accept. Connection is expensive, and most people aren't paying their share. So you started running calculations. Not consciously, not bitterly, just efficiently. How much energy does this person take? How much do they return? How often do I feel worse after talking to them? How often do I have to perform stability so they can fall apart? And the data came back clear. The cost was too high. So you didn't make a dramatic exit. You didn't burn bridges or send manifestos. You just stopped rebuilding them when they collapsed on their own. You stopped texting first. Stopped suggesting plans. Stopped being the one who held space when no one was holding space for you. And what you found was this: most of them didn't notice, or didn't care enough to ask why. That told you everything. You learned early that your feelings had a quota. Too much sadness made you difficult. Too much anger made you scary. Too much need made you exhausting. So you learned to be easy, low maintenance. The kind of child who didn't ask for much because asking meant risking rejection in the one place you couldn't afford to lose. Your parents weren't cruel. They weren't absent in the obvious ways. They were just elsewhere. Emotionally. Busy. Overwhelmed. And you, sensitive, perceptive, already reading the room before you had the language for it, you learned not to add to the weight. You became the good kid. The one who didn't complain. The one who handled things alone. And that became your template. You carried it into friendships, into relationships, into every dynamic where you showed up too much and expected too little in return. Because the first people who were supposed to show up for you didn't. Not consistently. Not in the ways that mattered. So you stopped expecting it from anyone else. The pattern followed you. Different people. Same script. They loved you when you were light. When you were fun, supportive, emotionally available on demand. But the second you needed something, the second you weren't performing stability, they dimmed. Got busy. Got distant. Sent short replies and long silences. And you told yourself it was okay. That everyone has their own struggles. That you were asking for too much. But you weren't asking for too much. You were asking for the same energy you gave. The same attention you offered without being asked. And what you learned over and over was this. Most people don't want connection. They want comfort. And the second you stop being comfortable, the second you become complicated or sad or in need of something they can't give in 5 minutes, they retreat. So you stop chasing them. Not because you're bitter. Not because you think everyone is bad. But because you finally recognize the difference between people who love you and people who love what you do for them. You're alone now. But it's not the kind of alone they think it is. It's not loneliness. It's not bitterness. It's not some cold, self-imposed exile. It's quiet. And in that quiet, you're not constantly bracing. Not performing. Not calculating whether you're too much or not enough. You're not waiting for texts that won't come. Not replaying conversations to figure out what you did wrong. Not wondering if you matter to people who only remember you when they need something. The absence of noise is not the same as emptiness. It's the absence of rejection, of disappointment, of giving pieces of yourself to people who never intended to give anything back. You didn't build walls. You just stopped tearing yourself down to make doors for people who weren't coming inside anyway. Here's what no one tells you about being low maintenance. People get used to your absence. They get comfortable with your silence, with your ability to handle everything alone. And eventually, they stop checking in altogether. Because you've trained them, not intentionally, but by never asking for help, by always being okay, by making it easy for them to forget you're even there. And when you finally pull away, when you stop being the one who reaches out, who forgives, who shows up, they don't panic. They don't fight for you. They just let you go. Because you made it easy. And that's the cruelest part. Not that they don't care, but that your absence doesn't feel like a loss to them. Because they never had to miss you before. People will tell you that isolation is avoidance. That you're running from intimacy. That you're scared of being hurt again. And maybe that's partially true. But it's not the whole truth. Because isolation isn't always avoidance. Sometimes, it's pattern recognition. You're not scared of connection. You're exhausted by the kind of connection that only exists when you're the one maintaining it. You're not avoiding intimacy. You're avoiding the performance of intimacy with people who were never intimate with you. There's a difference between protecting yourself and punishing yourself. And choosing to be alone because being with people makes you feel more alone? That's not punishment. That's clarity. You still feel it sometimes. The guilt. Like you're doing something wrong by not trying harder. By not giving more chances. By not being the bigger person. You see their names in your phone and feel a pull. A responsibility. Maybe you're being too harsh. Maybe they didn't mean it. Maybe you're remembering it wrong. But then you remember the specifics. The time you were crying and they changed the subject. The time you needed help and they said they were busy, then posted about their plans an hour later. The time you showed up for them in the middle of the night, and they couldn't show up for you in the middle of the day. You're not remembering it wrong. You're just finally remembering it accurately. When they say they miss you, what they mean is, they miss the version of you that didn't have boundaries. The version that said yes. That didn't ask questions. That absorbed their chaos without complaint. They miss the you that made them feel good about themselves without requiring them to show up. But that version of you was dying. Slowly, quietly, under the weight of being needed by people who never thought to ask if you needed anything. So when you hear, "You've changed," don't hear it as an accusation. Hear it as confirmation. Because the version of you they're mourning is the version that had to disappear so the real you could survive. You're not healed. You're not fixed. You didn't cut everyone off and suddenly become whole. But you're not bleeding anymore. And that's something. You've stopped giving your energy to people who only take. Stopped waiting for reciprocity from people who were never planning to give it. You've stopped mistaking loneliness for love. Stopped confusing presence with performance. And maybe one day, you'll find people who don't make you feel like you have to choose between being yourself and being wanted. People who show up without being asked. Who stay when things get hard. Who don't treat your needs like an inconvenience. Maybe. But for now you're here. In the quiet. Not bitter. Not hopeless. Not waiting. Just protected. And sometimes, that's the strongest thing you can be.